Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our BRIDG meeting for December 2022. My name is Arian Ravenbach, and I will be serving as the moderator for today's meeting. As a reminder, the Office of Agency Services at the National Archives and Records Administration hosts these bi-monthly Records and Information Discussion Group, or BRIDG, meetings to present information relating to federal records management. BRIDG is co-produced by the Office of the Chief Records Officer for the United States and the Federal Records Center program, and is live streamed to the audience over our YouTube channel. Generally, BRIDG consists of a scheduled program of presentations with an open forum at the end of each meeting to ask questions of the presenters or of any related federal records management topic of interest. Viewers are encouraged to post questions in the chat or by sending an email to rm.communications@nara.gov. Our staff is monitoring this email box during the meeting. You are welcome to make comments during the meeting in the YouTube chat. However, please keep in mind that all comments are subject to moderation, so we ask that you keep the comments relevant to topics being discussed. Copies of the presentation slides will be posted on the BRIDG page of the Archives website. That web page is also where you will find the transcription of today's meeting when it is available, as well as links and information about previous and upcoming BRIDG meetings. If you have general comments about BRIDG or suggestions for future topics, you can use that same email address, rm.communications@nara.gov, to pass these along to us. We welcome your feedback. With that, I would like to start today's meeting by introducing Lawrence Brewer, the Chief Records Officer for the U.S. government. Good afternoon, Lawrence.
Hey, good afternoon, and thank you, Arian. So good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the December Agency Services BRIDG meeting, the very last meeting that we have this calendar year before we get into 2023 and start talking about everything that we're going to do for next year. So we have a lot to talk about, which is not unusual. We typically do have a lot to talk about, but December is one of those months where sometimes we just have to cancel meetings because there's so much going on as people are trying to wrap up what they're working on at the end of the year. So I'll take a quick look at the agenda and go over that and do some speaker introductions before we get into the main meeting. If we can flip the slide, we can see what that looks like. So I got a couple quick announcements before we get into the main program, and then I will turn it over to Chris Pinkney, who will give us some updates from the Federal Records Centers program. Then we will have a very quick update from Don Rosen and Cindy Smolovic from our Oversight and Reporting program, talking about annual reporting that'll be kicking off in January. And then Maggie Hawkins will come talk to us about a notice on changes to previously approved schedules and what we are planning for that. And then Don McElwain from the National Declassification Center is joining us to talk about classified transfers and the NA 14130. Then Maggie will be coming back to talk to us about the work that we're doing to expand the capstone approach to other electronic messages. And then we will close the meeting with an update on the launch of the Electronic Records Archives 2.0 from Sam McClure and David Lake. So we have a lot to cover. And without any further ado, we will flip the slide. And I will give you a couple of quick updates. And obviously, I think the first one, I think the update I think we're all interested in hearing is about where we are with M1921. And as I said at the last BRIDG meeting, we have been and we continue to coordinate with OMB on the update to M1921 and specifically around the target dates, which I was able to announced at the last BRIDG meeting. We are looking to extend by 18 months to June 30th, 2024. So I know we're coming to the end of the month. It is December 2022. We are still hopeful that it will be released before we turn the calendar to 2023. And we continue to work on trying to make that happen. So where we are right now is trying to get the signatures on the final memo. And as soon as we do, and all of the signatures are there from the Director of OMB and from the Acting Archivist of the United States, we will be alerting all of you through our usual memos and postings on Records Express. So all I can say there is stay tuned. For AROC and the renewal of that credential, we talked about it at the last bridge, but I just wanted to remind everyone that if you are an agency records officer formally designated by your SAORM, you may have already received notification from us that you are due for renewing your AROC credential. If you have not received a communication from us, then you are not likely due for the renewal when we begin the first cycle on January 3rd. So if you are in the first group, you have 6 months to complete the renewal. It will start on January 3rd, 2023, which means your due date for that first group will be July 3rd, 2023. So for all agency records officers, when you're due for a renewal, we will send you a welcome packet along with the notification with details on the renewal process. And we'll also be sending information on how you can access our learning management system so that you can get in there, review the content, and get started on renewing that credential. So if you have any questions about whether you should have received it or questions about what to do now that you have, please send those to our group email box for the Records Management Training Program, which is rmt1@nara.gov. Again, that's rmt1@nara.gov. So with that, I will stop and turn things over to Chris Pinkney for some updates out of the FRCP. Chris?
Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate the intro, and thanks to everybody for giving me a few minutes of your time during what is no doubt a busy December. I'll keep this pretty short since we have a number of interesting topics on the calendar, but I wanted to let everybody know that for the FRCP, it continues to be a busy first quarter and have a few fairly interesting updates related to our operations. After the pandemic, I feel that I should always start with all FRCs remain fully open. We have several of our centers are in areas where the CDC community levels are now considered medium or high, but all FRC staff remain on site and all of our activities continue unabated. The focus of the FRC remains on backlog reduction, and we continue to work to fully restore all of our services to their pre-pandemic levels. All of our centers continue to receive large numbers of new transfers, and the volume has only increased as we close in on the original M1921 date. Since October 1st, FRCP staff have received and shelved in excess of 171,000 boxes. A review of ARCIS this morning shows an additional 18,713 transfers, covering a little more than 312,000 cubic feet that are sitting in approved status. And we have another 3,676 transfers that are in submitted status and awaiting review. As a reminder, folks only need to get transfers into submitted status in ARCIS in order to make the original M1921 deadline. We'll then work with all the agencies in 2023, and we'll receive records as you have time to ship, and we have room and staff to receive. The FRCP will have some broad flexibility. An agency shouldn't have to worry about having transfers canceled after the 90-day window or anything like that. One of our other areas of focus right now remains disposal. We've had sustained efforts throughout the first quarter, and very sincere thanks to everyone who's blocked time to review and return your disposal notifications. It's appreciated, and we're getting them into the queue as rapidly as we can. We have a lot of staff working on disposal right now, and the FRCP has destroyed more than 217,000 cubic feet in FY23. The total disposal backlog, which now includes both records whose destruction would have occurred during the pandemic and other transfers that have been more recently approved, sits just over 1.5 million cubic feet, and this is down from almost 2 million cubic feet in the middle of calendar year 2022. We continue to reduce the number, although it'll be a lot of work. I think the one we're using is we're saying it's roughly analogous in scope to the post-till lift project, but we intend to keep staff on it until we can get the disposal backlog down to 0 again. And then one other thing I wanted to address real quickly is that in the last few weeks, I've received a number of emails or phone calls asking about the status of on-site agency reviews. This is now fine for centers that are located in areas where the CDC community level is low or medium. Interested agency researchers should contact the local FRC director and arrange the visit with them. It's back to a pre-pandemic world, so we're back to the before times. There may still be some limits on the total number of agency researchers we can host. It's dependent on the local facility, as well as the number of box reviews that we can support each day. But that's pretty much the world in which we lived pre-2020. And so we are back there and happy to have visitors. And that is pretty much where we are right now. I take the opportunity to wish everybody on the line a very happy holiday season. And I look forward to giving people another update in February. And on that note, I can either attempt to answer questions or I can turn things back over to Arian.
Thanks, Chris. We do have a couple of questions that have come in that I think one of them, at least we can address as an FRCP related issue. I've been told the FRCs are telling people that the extension, I guess the extension to M1921 is happening even though it is not official. Have they been instructed to do that?
We have told people what we announced back in October, that per everything we know, there will most likely be an 18-month extension. It's not official until it's signed and released. But at this point, we are encouraging people to get things in if you can. And if you can't, hopefully we're going to get news in the next week or two that there is an official formal extension.
Agreed.
Don't want to get in front of the administration here. That's not something we do.
No, agreed. And thank you for that, for clarifying that. With that, we'll just keep reminding people that they can email us questions to rm.communications@nara.gov or to put them in the chat. And we can move on to the annual reporting update. And I will turn it over to Cindy Smolovic.
Hello, everybody. Just a quick update or a reminder. With the coming of the new year comes annual reporting on activities for this year. And the opening day is January 9th, with all reports due by March 10th. We will expect the same 3 pieces that we have for the past several years: the Senior Agency Official for Records Management report, the maturity model on electronic records management and email records management, and the records management self-assessment. For the most part, this should be, unless you're new to being an agency records officer, should be similar to what you've done previously. If you are no longer the contact person or the person assigned by your agency to answer all of these annual reporting requirements, please contact RM Self-Assessment at nara.gov as soon as possible to give us who should be the person to receive the links to the survey tool and the template for the SARM report. If nothing has changed, you should be good to go. If you have other questions regarding annual reporting, just send them to that same email box, and we have staff standing by to answer your questions. And that's our announcement for this go-round. Thanks, Arian.
Thank you, Cindy, for that update. And again, if folks have questions, Cindy and Don will be sticking around. We can handle those at the end of the meeting. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Maggie Hawkins to talk about changes to previously approved schedules.
Thank you, Arian, and good afternoon, everyone. Next slide. Would like to speak to you today about a policy change we will be making regarding what we call changes to previously approved schedules. They're also known colloquially as pen and ink changes. You may be more familiar with it by that title. And I am announcing today that we will be discontinuing them beginning in January of 2023. And once we issue this, it will be agencies will be required to reschedule records for these changes. I thought I'd just take a second to just describe what a pen and ink change is in a little more detail in case you aren't familiar with it. For many, many years, we have made modifications to already approved schedules for what we call, relatively minor things like changing the name of a system, updating descriptions, and for more major things like extending or changing the time frame for which permanent records are transferred to the National Archives, or lengthening some temporary retention periods. And just to repeat, we will be discontinuing that practice in January of 2023. Next slide. So this, as I mentioned, will be communicated in early January 2023. It will be done via an AC memo to records officers, and you will see that coming out first or second week of January. And it's going to be in the format of rescinding the current frequently asked questions, which describe this process. So that's how you will recognize that this has been put into effect. Next slide, please. So all previously completed pen and ink changes will remain valid, and any pending requests we have on hand will need to be completed by mid-January. That time frame is being set to help facilitate the migration of data to ERA 2.0, which, as you know, is on the agenda for this meeting later. Next slide. So you may wonder why we're doing this, and there's several reasons why. One is it's going to eliminate essentially what's a dual process. In many respects, it may seem very simple to submit via email a request to change a schedule, but once we receive those, there's a lot of work on our end to, one, evaluate whether it's appropriate for a pen and ink change, and while we don't have any hard numbers on it, anecdotally, most of the requests we get, we end up having to direct people to rescheduling the records anyway. And in the time we spent, talking about that and thinking about it, an agency could have already submitted a schedule. We want to eliminate that dual process. It also brings the actual disposition authorities into a fully digital environment, which is ERA 2.0. There are thousands and thousands of disposition authorities that originated via the SF-115 process and are literally in paper. So what we will do, and with this, is it will, by requiring rescheduling, it will bring all those legacy authorities into a fully digital environment, which supports the memorandum that we are always discussing, and I think will just generally help both agencies and the National Archives. Also, we had a recent requirement to review schedules every 5 years to see if they need to be updated, and it supports that. We have a lot of schedules that we're kind of holding together with pen and ink changes, sometimes multiple ones, to the point that really the records just need to be rescheduled. And that's been pointed out to us by oversight agencies and entities when there are many schedules from the 1970s that are still being used. So we believe that requiring a rescheduling will help support that desire to get all the schedules that are out there in an updated. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions anyone may have about this change in policy, either via the chat or email or the other venues that Arian has noted.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm not seeing any that have come in on this topic yet.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'll be here at the end, and I'll also be presenting again. So I'll be here the whole time. So if you have any questions, there will always be the end of this meeting to ask them as well. Thank you, Arian.
thank you, Maggie. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Don McElwain to talk about the about the NA 14130 for classified transfers.
Thank you, Arian, and I appreciate the chance to come back and talk with the bridge again. I think the last time I presented on this was prior to COVID, so it's been a little while. And we just got the next slide, please. There we go. So basically, it's been a decade since we started requiring the NA 14130 for classified accessioning. And the reason was we were seeing there was a disconnect between agency records officers and agency declassification program managers, and what was coming over the transom into the National Archives was wildly inconsistent. So this was a way to get declassification and records management professionals talking to each other before the records came to the National Archives. I think it's been wildly successful. Since we've started doing these, we haven't had any security violations. I can tell you horror stories of the Wild West days of the early 2000s and late 1990s where there were situations where classified information was put at risk. So this form, I hope, is not a burden, but I hope you look upon it as seeing a way to protect your classified information when it comes to the National Archives. They kindly broke out the form because it wasn't fitting and it wasn't displaying well into a bunch of different parts. So I'll just go through what these are for you, and if you want a copy of the form to use within your program, if your declassification officers don't have it, you can either email me or you can email ndc@nara.gov. So at the beginning of the form, we ask, what's your agency? Who is your declassification manager? And that's the person who we would contact if there's any questions about classification, declassification. What did the declassification reviewer mean? The next field is one we get a lot of questions of, agency ID. This is an optional field, but it's a chance for you to put if you have an internal control number, internal tracking number. Perhaps you had sent the records to your records facility. An example that I like to use is the Department of State uses lot file numbers. That's where you would put that. And then phone and email contacts for that declassification program manager. Next is the ERA transfer request number. We need that so that this form can ride along with the accessioning paperwork in ERA. If it's an annual move transfer as opposed to a direct offer, the FRC transfer number is very useful and very helpful. And if you have the disposition authority, that's good as well. And of course, the box numbers. You're sending us 23 boxes, but from the Record Center, but box number 1 starts out at, the first box doesn't start at 1, it starts at box 36 for some reason. That's helpful for us as well when we're doing our declassification processing after accessioning. And then finally, the series title. So that's kind of the background information that helps us get back to your declassification folks if we have questions, and helps us make sure that we're getting the right material, that we can process it and work with your agency folks here at the National Archives that are helping us get records declassified and out onto the open shelf. Next slide, please. So the next part of the form asks a series of questions. And the first one, of course, is, have these been reviewed for declassification in accordance with Section 3.3 of the Executive Order? on classification, safeguarding, and declassification, and its implementing directive. On the actual form, the PDF form itself, the sections of the executive order and the implementer, they're hot links, so you can go right to the language if you have questions about what that language actually is. Hopefully the answer is yes. If the answer is no, you need to contact us in the NDC so we can discuss. There may be extenuating circumstances why we should accession these records prior to your review, but we're not in general going to approve the transfer for records that have not been reviewed as required. So the next question, next slide please. We could have the next slide, please. There we go. In the early days of automatic declassification with the Clinton order, the previous order to this one, agencies did a good job in general of finding what was still sensitive to them because of a lack of training, a lack of communication among agencies. They didn't always do a really good job identifying what we call referrals, which is classified information in your records that might not be of interest to you, but might be of interest to another agency. That might be, in the term of art, is their equity. And this was most obvious with information that was classified in accordance with the Atomic Energy Act, or also known as restricted data or formally restricted data. As a result, the Kyle and Lott amendments to the 1999 and 2000 Defense Authorization Act was passed, and it requires now that the Department of Energy train reviewers on how to recognize restricted data and formally restricted data. So the next question is, have you met these requirements of the Kyle and Lott amendment? And then hopefully it's yes, and you're determining, and again, this is your declassification program manager saying that these records are highly unlikely to contain restricted data or formally restricted data. Or we've reviewed this with trained reviewers, and indeed there is marked restricted data or formally restricted data in the files. Or these records contain what we think might be restricted data or formally restricted data based on our training, but it's unmarked. Dealing with older historical records, we have found, I don't know what that's coming from, but we have found that, sometimes in the older records, agencies didn't always mark the presence of restricted data or formally restricted data, or possibly it was buried in a portion marking. So reviewers should catch that, and that we want them to help us identify that. The next question we've got, which is still on this slide, is: are the boxes labeled to perform to show that a review was performed? Either a label, or some agencies put a review determination sheet in box 1 of the transfer. If the answers to these questions are no, contact us and we can talk with you and your declassification program manager to get to yes, one way or the other. Next slide, please. Have all exempt documents been tabbed using the standard Form 715? Standard Form 715 is an approved, basically a collar, I should have brought one down with me, that says these records have been reviewed and these documents are exempt from automatic declassification. If you've got tabs in the boxes with your agency's interest, say yes. If you say no, you're indicating that your agency's classified equity is fully declassified. So we still need to know, do you have your own agency's sensitivities in these records that you're transferring? Next slide, please. Have all referrals and exclusions been tabbed in accordance with, and again, there'd be a hot link in the form to the implementing directive, which says, you as the transferring agency need to not only review and identify your sensitivities, but you need to identify sensitivities that another agency may still want to protect and may be able to protect. The difference between a referral and an exclusion is kind of a D-class nerd term of art. An exclusion is a particular kind of referral to the Department of Energy for that restricted data and formally restricted data. A referral is any other equity to any other agency. And I like to give an example. Back when I was starting out, I started out as a reviewing technician in declassification a long time ago. And State Department embassies would send a weekly report back to the Department of State back in the day. And so it might have information from the State Department's political officer, the State Department's economic officer, but it might have information from other agencies that are part of that embassy team. So the State Department might not care what the military attaché was reporting in their report, but the Defense Intelligence Agency may very well care and may want to protect that information. So that's an example of a referral. And your declassification program managers will know that, and they will be able to appropriately tab for referral to DIA or to whatever other agency. Next slide, please. And this is one because sometimes records are part of a special access program, and that is a program that individuals have to be specifically read in or briefed into. So if you have SAP or other records that have the requirement to have individuals be read into it, we need to know that, and we need to have that discussion for two reasons. One, so we can appropriately store the records in the correct space when they get here, and two, so that we're not creating a security violation by having people working in those records that have not been read into that specific tailored program. For well north of 90% of your records, the answer for this question is going to be no. Most of your agencies were dealing with, what I would consider garden variety, collateral, top secret and below, or if you're dealing with sensitive compartmented information, we have NDC staff that are already read into various compartments of SCI, but specifically for those narrowly tailored special access programs where we want to make sure before the records come, we do the right thing. Next slide, please. So basically, the next thing we're going to ask you, if you've got review information and it's coming out of a classified system, so in other words, you created a classified folder list that indicates the status of the documents in a particular folder, and it's classified, we still want that information if you can produce it, but talk to us first because you don't want that writing with an unclassified ERA transfer. However, if you have a spreadsheet or other information that contains review results and it's not classified, we would love to have that as well. And we've got here on the screen, examples of, how you could name that. So if you've got a spreadsheet that's got the folder list and the review determinations, and there's nothing classified about that, we'd love to have that. We can use that to help us continue the declassification processing here at Archives 2 with the goal of getting those records out on the shelf to the extent possible, and those documents that are still classified protected. Next slide, please. That's about all I've got. I will mention that the current version of the NA 14130 has on the back side of it questions about, are there other restrictions? and we've listed some of the common what we call in the FOIA world, B3 exemptions. And while this is somewhat redundant because the TR is already going to ask you, are there restrictions? We find having this information helpful to us when we're working with classified, for example. Sometimes agencies will flag other statutory national security type related exemptions, particularly some of the intelligence community agencies. So we find this helpful. Questions, comments, anything I can answer?
Thank you, Don. We did have one question that came in while you were talking. The NA 14130 is only for declassified materials, correct?
It is for records that are coming in that have been reviewed for declassification. So if everything is declassified, we still want a 14130. If you have reviewed it and exempted everything in that series and have applied a file series exemption that has been approved by the ICE-CAP, we still want a 14130. If in the case of most records coming, you've reviewed the records, you've tabbed your exemptions, you've tabbed your referrals and exclusions, we definitely want the NA 14130. If you have not reviewed your permanently valuable classified records and they're 25 years and older, we still want to talk to you before the records come over here. Because by doing that, you're in effect saying, I'm waiving any equity and all of my stuff is automatically declassified. And by the way, I've met the requirement to review these in accordance with Kyle Lott. And there's no other agency that could possibly have classified equity in this accession. So anything that started out as a classified transfer, whether it's been declassified in full, whether it's remaining classified in full, or more likely it's a mix of classified and declassified records, we really need that 14130 to help us process your records and to help you avoid a security problem, security violation. No one wants to write security reports.
Thank you, Don. Those are the questions that have come in. There have been a couple of other questions in the YouTube chat about the regulations and the updates that we'll handle at the end of the meeting. So for now, we'll put you back on hold and see if any come in, and I'll turn the meeting back over to Maggie to talk about the capstone approach for electronic messages.
Great. Thank you, Arian. And thank you, Don. I do remember when things were the Wild West on the transfer of classified records front. So it's always good to hear about all the progress we've made. So I want to here today to talk a little bit about the capstone approach for electronic messages. And before I even advance the slides, I'm going to alert you that this is more of a here's what's coming rather than comprehensive overview of everything. Next slide. So first, I wanted to put some context to this and note that NARA will be issuing several guidance products related to managing electronic messages. And as noted on the slide, this is a preview of what's coming. We have updates to regulations coming. There's a NARA bulletin expanding the capstone approach to electronic messages that will be arriving soon. We also have a GRS transmittal expanding GRS 6.1 to cover some electronic messages other than email. We also will be updating the form NA 1005, which is the capstone verification form and is the form required to implement the GRS. And as it notes, it's going to be a new form and we're going to be expanding the GRS. So there's a lot coming up in the next month or two. Next slide. So as I mentioned, GRS 6.1 has been expanded to include certain other types of electronic messages. Those include email system chat, messages on mobile devices, what we normally think of as text messages, and also messages from messaging services on third-party applications of what we might commonly think of as WhatsApp or Signal. And you'll note that the verb tense, the GRS 6.1 has been expanded to include those. The GRS expanding this has already been signed, but the general record schedules are unique amongst all schedules in that they are not effective the second they are signed, unlike other schedules. Instead, they need to be transmitted formally through the Federal Register to essentially the heads of all federal agencies. And that has its own process that we are undertaking right now. And we expect, notice the word expect that to be out in January of 2023. So once that comes out, agencies may then use the GRS for email or for email and the other types of electronic messages that I had mentioned earlier that are included in the scope. Next slide. And we still will be requiring the NA 1005, which many of you have already completed, submitted, had approved, sometimes a couple of iterations of it already. And this is going to all be pursuant to NARA Bulletin 2022-02, resubmission of NA 1005 forms, which will be required as of January 2023. So essentially, sort of leapt right into the next topic here, which is that resubmission of capstone forms, mandatory resubmission, as outlined in NARA Bulletin 2022-02, is coming. We have defined the resubmission cycle as January 31st, 2023 through April 30th, 2023. And that resubmission window will be opening at the end of January and will be closing in April. Next slide. Also wanted to note that we will have a new NA 1005. We started with a PDF form, we moved to an Excel spreadsheet, and we will have yet another version of it. It will be a spreadsheet as well. However, it's being revised to account for the changes to GRS 6.1 vis-a-vis the ability to potentially use it for other types of electronic messages other than email. And we will be posting this form on our website as soon as possible. We are in the final stages of putting the sort of the finishing touches on the form. And when it's up on our website, we will announce it via an AC memo. So that will give you a chance to get a head start on that before we open the resubmission window on the 31st of January. Next slide. I did want to point out that earlier versions of the form will not be accepted. So hopefully you've not started on your resubmission using the old form. However, if you have, especially if you've completed it, alert our GRS team at their mailbox, which is grsteam@nara.gov. But generally speaking, we won't be accepting earlier versions of the form. And when you see the new one, it'll be clear why it's a little bit different. The very important thing I wanted to point out is that we will be providing a webinar on the new version of the form and all the details surrounding being able to expand your capstone coverage to different type of messages on January 24th. And again, there will be an AC memo with details of this forthcoming. However, you could mark that on your calendar. And that webinar will be where your detailed questions will be answered and your chance to ask more detailed questions. Next slide. So what I wanted to do here was just reiterate some of the key dates and times that I mentioned, because there was a lot mentioned there. So first thing is the new form is going to be posted up on our website late December, early January. And again, that new form will be what's required for resubmission. We will be hosting a webinar on the 24th of January to explain a lot of the details associated with this. And then on the 31st, the window for submitting the mandatory resubmissions will open. Next slide. So with this, I'm happy to answer any questions on this topic.
Thanks, Maggie. We did have one that came in before you announced the webinar. That was about, are we going to do a live training? And we handled that in the presentation. So we kind of predicted that would come up. I have another one.
Mm-hmm.
What updated capstone guidance will NAR be providing to clarify, simplify who should be designated? Right now, there is so much disparity in large organizations with subcomponents regarding who should be designated. Records officers are left to justify who and why individuals have been selected.
So I noticed that question earlier in the chat, and it's a really good question. And I'll just say, like, right now, there are no plans to, quote unquote, simplify or clarify the guidance on picking who, or identifying, I should say, who are the capstone officials. However, we are always looking at ways to improve the process and expand the FAQs and rethink things. So to that end, that is a question I will be taking to what we call our capstone development team. And we have a number of individuals on that team. It's a rather large team. It represents appraisal supervisors, our general counsel. Lawrence is on it. The policy team is represented there. And we will look at that. In the meantime, we have a meeting this week. We have a meeting in January as well. If you the person who asked that question, if they wanted to send in some specific comments or concerns via, again, the GRS email or the RM Communications email, we'll get that as well. I think that could help us kind of think through the comment better. So we would like to improve how that's handled.
Thank you. I think that covers the questions, and I don't see any additional ones, so we'll put you back on standby. We'll move to the agenda to the David Lake and Sam McClure show to talk about ERA 2.0.
All right, thank you, Arian. Happy to be back. Sam and I were here back in October. Gave a more detailed update on ERA 2.0, the launch of it, the migration project we're doing right now to get ready for that launch. So wanted to give a brief update today on where we are with that. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk briefly about the timeline and where we are on that at this point. Sam will talk a little bit more about user account creation and what needs to be done to get ready for using ERA 2.0 when we do launch it. So as I talked about last time, we have a migration project underway to migrate all of those record schedules and transfer requests forms and their data from the ERA-based system that you use today to the ERA 2.0 system. So all those will be there. Whether they were in a final state, terminal state of, say, approved, or whether they were in flight or in progress. So we're working on that right now. We're heavy into transforming the data and testing how that data gets injected into the new system, and that the workflow picks it up, and the data looks correct in all of those forms. As we talked about last time, the final migration of data will require a pause in the use of ERA. So essentially, we will bring down the current ERA system for a period of up to 4 weeks while we finish the final part of the migration. And then at the end of that period, up to 4 weeks, we we'll launch ERA 2.0, open it up for use by all of you. So with the current schedule, we're pretty close to what we talked about last time. I think the schedule's getting pushed out a little bit that we reflected here. But essentially, we're planning to stop use of the current system around the end of January or early February. I would say at this point, we're leaning more towards early February. And then, as we said, that up to 4 weeks time of that pause would mean that the launch of ERA 2.0 around probably early March at this point is what we're looking at. So again, these are kind of the earliest possible dates, and we're updating those as we go along. As I said, we're heavy into the testing right now of the migration, and we fully expect for data issues to pop up as we do that. We've allowed buffer for that. The question is, how many issues do we find and the time it takes to rectify those? So if there's any, we're going to be communicating with you through the Bridge venue as well as others in terms of AC memos or other communications, especially if these dates move out anymore. We'll update you as we go along so that you're aware of where we are and how long that shutdown is going to take and when that date is for the launch of ERA 2.0 for use. Next slide, please. And Sam, I think I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, David. So as David mentioned in our last Bridge appearance, we gave a lot more detail on what to sort of expect in the system and some of the high levels on the data migration. We just wanted to touch back on some of the same points about user accounts just to make some of the same points we made before. Basically in 2.0, from an agency perspective, we'll have the same roles as are available currently in ERA, record scheduler, certified official, so on and so forth. At the launch of ERA 2.0, at that time frame David was just describing, everyone who has an account in the current ERA will have an account with the same profile in ERA 2.0. A question came up last time, will there still be account managers for each organization who have users in ERA? And the answer is yes. We're getting the starting point from the ERA account perspective, but from then on, it'll be just as we have in the current ERA. The respective account manager for your organization can contact the ERA help desk to get new users set up in the system, deactivate users who've left your organization, so on and so forth, the typical account management piece of that. But we'll have a one-to-one match from the end of your use of the current system to the start of your use of the new system. The thing that changes is our requirement to authenticate into the system using your PIV or CAC card, and that will require an active profile in OMB Max. And so on the one hand, you have your account in ERA 2.0. On the other, you'll need to have a profile active in max.gov so that when you authenticate into ERA 2.0, you will visit the URL in your web browser, Chrome or Edge. You'll look to authenticate with your PIV. It's going to take you through the OMB Max process. You'll come back to the dashboard for ERA 2.0. The process will be fairly seamless. We've tested it. We're reasonably confident it won't create any unnecessary drama, and it'll streamline some of the authentication that is available for system access. For those organizations who do not issue PIV CACs, there is an exception process. We work out with the ERA help desk that would still use an OMB Max profile. In those cases, you would be using your email and your password. But in either case, it's an active account in the ERA 2.0 environment, plus a profile in ombmax.gov. If you've not noticed before, David and I are not by our nature great communicators, but our colleagues in the Chief Records Officer organization are working to supplement our poor communication style. There'll be AC memos coming out very soon, including descriptions of the OMB Max profile requirement, giving you the URL if you don't have a current profile established in that system. And other guidance will be coming out, job aids for how to authenticate into the system using your PIV or your CAC card will be made available as well. So we mostly just wanted to touch base on, at the start of this, your accounts will very strongly resemble your current accounts in ERA. The authentication piece will be different. Guidance documents will be provided. We'll have the ability to get you up and running with this new means in place. And so, again, with any questions, we will be happy to talk about it here, or as other questions come in, we'll take them offline and respond about accounts from there. Next slide, please. So this is just to reiterate the point that David made earlier. We're in the middle of testing as well as active migration efforts in our non-production environments. The point of testing is to find problems before they come out to real people on the production side. So our testing has to continue on the positive path. The other work has to continue as scheduled. We'll be able to stick to the timeline that's been described today. If it slips for whatever reason, if testing proves that there are more issues than we anticipated, if other circumstances arise that have us push this timeline out, we will communicate that as soon as we know it. We want to give you a clear understanding of when to expect to stop work in ERA base, when you can expect to start work in ERA 2.0. The basic point is that it won't happen before late January, early February at the earliest. And as those timeframes become closer to actual, we'll communicate that. If at any point we need to push out, however briefly, we'll communicate that as well, so that you have an understanding of what system will be available when, so you can complete your work as needed. With that is the end of our portion here. I think we're certainly able to answer questions, and I think, Arian, you're up to general questions for the overall meeting as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Sam. Thank you very much. We do have a couple sort of ERA 2.0-ish questions. First, a comment. Great to log into ERA 2.0 via Chrome or Edge with the CAC cards. Will ERA 2.0 allow users, based on their role, to create, run, and export ad hoc reports?
Short answer, no. Longer answer at launch. The longer answer is we'll have more robust searching and the ability to at least download a CSV of your results. Results being lists of forms and their data fields that are responsive to your queries. We don't have in the system as it launches in early 2023 the ability to run reports in terms of any sort of calculations or summations or average age of schedules and process or anything like that. We start with a fairly strong, somewhat idiosyncratic search capability, the ability to pull out results from there, save those queries, update those queries over time. We won't have very strong reporting from, again, the point of either calculating averages of ages or anything like that at launch, but more to come in that area as system development continues. David, did I botch anything?
No, I think that's accurate. Just one thing to remind all about is that in ERA 2.0, we only have one version of the schedule. So I know when doing searching in ERA base, you have to do a lot of work to filter out the multiple versions of schedules that you see in there. But in ERA 2.0, it should be, since there's only one version at any time, being able to do the proper searching that you need to do and then download the results of those searches. And as Sam said, and then, in say, for example, Excel, you can manipulate your results in a way that makes sense to you. But as we get started with the system, we're certainly happy to take feedback from any of you using the system about potentially whether there are standard reports that aren't there that you would be interested in. If we can get to the point where we can create an ad hoc reporting system that would allow you to kind of generate your own reports based on the metadata that we have, that's something we can certainly look at and prioritize.
Thank you. A couple around Capstone. I guess you can say, will the Capstone forms be in ERA 2.0, the ones Maggie was referring to? And then will the pause from ERA to ERA 2.0 affect the submittal of Capstone schedules because the time frames seem to overlap?
So at the launch of ERA 2.0, we will not be supporting the Capstone form with a workflow. In our case, we'll be a repository for Capstone data that'll get migrated into the system. But this next submission cycle will take place outside of ERA, just as the earlier submission cycles have. We're migrating in the current NA 1005s. As Maggie said, they're about to be overtaken by the next submission cycle. but those NA 1005s will, the current iteration will be migrated into the system, available through search. They'll be not able to be modified, and there's no workflow there. There'll be like a repository of the forms. This next effort through the first half of 23 will result in a new round of forms for us to migrate into the system, with a workflow to come before the next submission cycle. So we'll be looking to augment all the capabilities around the capstone form in ERA 2.0 as calendar year 2023 progresses. But at launch, you'll be able to see the current, although nearly to end, capstone forms. We'll take in the new forms when this next cycle is over, but you won't be working in the system to submit or review those forms.
Thank you. Another question. Will we need to register our IP addresses to use ERA 2.0 like we did 1.0?
That's a great question, and this came up after our last presentation as well. The approach we're going to take is to port over those same whitelists that we have available in the ERA base to 2.0. We're basically taking the same access setup that users currently are using for ERA base from an IP address standpoint and a user role standpoint, moving those into the new system. So we'll look to have that available from day one. Your current IPs as addressed as whitelisted will remain valid for the new system environment. If any of that changes, contact the help desk. Let's get those updated. There have been a couple of those that have been updated in recent weeks and months, but we'll look to carry that over as it is.
Thank you. And one more. Will we be able to take action on more than one transfer at a time in ERA 2.0?
The answer is always, it depends when the question is posed to the National Archives, correct? We will have bulk actions built into both the transfer request and the record schedule, but especially on the transfer request. To propose TRs, one-to-many can be selected. We'll even have a thing where you can commit to the terms of agreement once and have it apply to all the transfer requests. They'll come over to the corresponding custodial units on the National Archives side. So there is a what we call bulk action available in ERA 2.0. And that'll all be described in the user documentation that'll be made available for agency users at launch.
Thank you, Sam and David. I think we've gotten all the ERA 2.0 questions out, and now I'm going to shift the meeting over to sort of more general questions that have come in during our meeting. So I'll ask Lawrence to come forward and start helping me out here.
I will do
Is there a template or some type of enrollment process for newly appointed members? I believe this is records officers, maybe.
Yeah, so we have a NARA bulletin. It is NARA bulletin 2017-02, where it talks about the responsibilities of senior agency officials for records management. And as part of that bulletin, specifically the last paragraph, I think, which is paragraph 9, does talk about how agency records officers get designated to NARA. And it's kind of buried in that bulletin. I get it. But it's really important for us that we have formally designated records officers for each agency. We need those names for our distribution lists. We need them, as I talked about earlier, so that we can communicate about the requirement for an agency records officer credential. We need them, as Cindy talked about this morning, as contacts for annual reporting, and all of the work that we do around schedules, and really just to keep everybody informed about what is going on at the National Archives related to the work that you do in your agency. So there's no template per se, but there is a requirement to send a letter or communication to RO updates. That's ro.updates@nara.gov. And there is a sort of little bit of required information that would need to be included as part of that designation. And it does need to be submitted by the senior agency official for records management for that agency. So I encourage you to take a look at that bulletin, NARA Bulletin 2017-2.
Thank you. And now we're on to the other topic, digitization. Are there any updates to the finalization of 36 CFR 1236, Subpart E, digitizing permanent federal records? And I don't know.
Yeah, I think Lisa was going to pop in on this one. There she is.
keeps track of permanent federal records. I don't know. I think there she is at the bottom. He keeps track of permanent.
Lisa, can you come off of mute, please?
Technology has gotten us again.
She was making the mistake of watching the YouTube meeting.
Please come off of mute. Give us one moment.
Still on mute, so
We can't hear you, Lisa.
So I'll try one more time.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being patient while I got my mutes coordinated. And the answer to the question, where is NARA on digitization regulations, is that we are still in our internal review process. So we are still doing review of those regulations. That being said, we expect to finish the review process, internal review process by January, and that's January of 2023. And then after we finish that, we hope the regulations will be promulgated a few weeks after that. So we are looking at the second quarter FY23 to have that guidance available to agencies. If you have questions about the digitization regs, please email me and my team at rmstandards@nara.gov. RM standards is one word, and we'll be happy to answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa, for that update. Is Chris still on the call? Chris Pinckney?
Chris is here.
Thank you, Chris. What is the status of the trucks being available to pick up boxes for physical transfers of records to the FRCs?
So the lag between the time at which the question came in and right now gave me a chance to reach out to Shannon Harris, the director over at the WNRC, for an update. It wasn't the good news update I was hoping to get, but he reports that they are still taking limited appointments for truck service runs. They are down to a single CDL driver right now. It's one of the supervisors who used to drive a vehicle, and he's willing to help out when he can. They are in the hiring process to get us a new generation of drivers to operate the vehicles. But as of today, he's not yet got to the point where he's got a referral list. So my guess is the difficulty in getting things scheduled is going to persist for a number of additional weeks. I will almost guarantee you that once they get referral lists, they will make rapid selections, and we will do everything we can to get people onboarded, orientated, and trained ASAP. There may still be some lag if you were looking to do a pickup of classified records, because we'll have to work that out with our classified vault staff. But I guess ask me the question again in February, and hopefully I'll have something much happier to say.
We can already preload it into the February meeting then.
It's a deal. We'll try it again then.
Thank you, Chris. Maggie,
Yes.
will the capstone webinar on January 24th be recorded?
The presentation will be. We've decided to not record the questions so that we can have free-flowing conversation, but the presentation itself will be recorded.
Thank you. Can you please tell me if NARA plans to make their RCS lists on the website 508 compliant? This issue affects our agency a great deal. Any update will be much appreciated.
Great, thank you. And that question refers to the repository of records control schedules that is on our website. And there's a little bit of an answer here, so I'll just give it a full answer, though. So we do OCR, and we add 508 tags. However, it's with varying degrees of success due to the fact that we're dealing with scanned documents. The challenges are significant. To make them truly 508 compliant requires essentially creating structured text from a scanned document that has no embedded text or structure when you think about the old SF-115s. Adobe tools attempt to extract text and attempt to give it structure, but with very limited success, as people may have seen. The only way to make the scanned paper schedules 508 compliant would be actually to transcribe them all. They're also have a lot of hand annotations from the old pen and ink changes. And this would be an enormous undertaking for the entire federal government. So we currently have no plans to undertake this project, although we did do research and analysis on it and unfortunately concluded it was not within our budget to undertake. However, we spent some time today listening to Sam and David talk about ERA 2.0, and the PDF exports from ERA 2.0 are 508 compliant. So at least we can say that the new system itself and the PDF exports out of that system should meet 508 standards and WC3 guidance. So I'm happy to report that. And, that's yet another reason for us to move record schedules into ERA 2.0.
Thank you. Another question that came in during the capstone presentation: would it be possible for OPM to tag positions as capstone?
So I think that might not result in any practical benefit, in the sense that the positions that could be possibly tagged would be very basic ones, like the head of the agency, perhaps the agency's general counsel, very basic positions like that. And I don't know that would save anything from the effort of dealing with the more unique individual structures of most agencies. So unless I'm misunderstanding the question, I can't quite picture that working across. Again, we're dealing with the entire federal government, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, these very large cabinet level agencies, much less all the myriad of smaller ones.
Thank you. This is an ERA question, so Sam or David, and maybe Maggie, you want to chime in on this too. Will the NARA training and ERA teams update the current ERA training and user manuals for ERA upon the March debut of the new ERA? That's a lot of ERA.
So the answer is yes. Eddie and Michelle's teams are hard at work at creating a lot of ERA 2.0 training, which will include videos, demos, job aids. I'm really not doing it justice. There was a preview of some of it at the last BRIDG meeting. So if you go look at the YouTube of the October Bridge, you can get a much more full picture of what that will involve. But yes, Sam, I see you nodding. Maybe you have something to add?
No, I was just in complete agreement. It's going to be a totally revamped set of job aids and documentation, brand new system, new environment. We've done the easy part with the nuts and bolts of the user guide pieces. Eddie and his team have done the hard work in breaking it into digestible chunks, all to be posted on the web. As the preview, as Maggie alluded to in the last YouTube recording from a bridge session, easily digestible chunks specific to the need you need to undertake in the system at a given point in time. But yes, all new documentation.
And I was just at a meeting yesterday looking at some of it and looking at repurposing some of the external for our internal staff, because it's that well done. It's just very well done. I think people are going to be very pleased with it. And Sam's point about it being broken into digestible chunks is really key to it. You'll be able to, if you need to submit a schedule, you'll be able to just go in there and look that up very quickly. So we're all very excited about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we hope the system is easier to use, more user-friendly, but these forms and the workflows, they are substantive, they are complex. And so, we spent a lot of time developing the new training aids. So we hope they get used.
Thank you. Here's a question that came in around Capstone, I think we're not aware of any system that can help agencies manage mobile devices such as iPhones, especially in terms of ingesting the messages for long-term storage if services are moved from one vendor to another. Will there be guidance? Will there be any guidance for IT departments? And I think I can start by saying our Capstone guidance will remind agencies of the records management policy to create, manage, store, access, and dispose of federal records, including records created on mobile devices. We understand the iPhone has challenges with its proprietary software, and we continue to look for the better solutions through our Fermi project and other initiatives to help manage that. So I'll start with that. I don't know if Lawrence or Maggie, you want to add anything?
I think, this is an area that we're going to be talking a lot more about, especially as this new expanded capstone approach is issued. And, we want to be able to work with agencies and understand the challenges. And we know the challenges around iPhones exist related to the security. There are tools that will help agencies better manage and capture electronic messages. We're going to spend some time talking with agencies to kind of learn what those are and how they can be adopted. But, as we mentioned already in this meeting, we have to issue guidance on what the requirements are and what agencies should be doing, with the understanding that we're looking at all the federal agencies subject to those requirements. So we try not to get too specific and down into the details of implementation, but we are always ready and willing to learn more about the challenges that agencies are facing and see what we can do to share best practices, lessons learned about how to overcome some of the barriers that are in place.
Thank you. What is the future, and this may be for Chris or you, Lawrence, what is the future of the Pittsfield Federal Records Center? Are there any other major changes expected for other federal record centers in 2023, as well as transshipments, diversion of shipments?
That sounds like a me question.
I would agree.
So the latest update on Pittsfield is that the transshipment out of that facility continues. They're getting ready to switch from sending records from Pittsfield to Lenexa to sending records from Pittsfield to the Dayton FRC. I think the latest update I'd seen indicated that the final records may move maybe as early as the end of April, maybe into May. We should end occupancy at that site in August as we finish up with shelving, disassembly, and accessing of property and things like that. The other activity that'll take place in 23 is the closure of Warehouse 9, which is, I should have a giant flashing sign, not the Fort Worth FRC. It's the old annex that remains over on Felix Street. It's a building we maintained after we moved out of the old Federal Record Center at that site. It's been very useful for the storage of permanent records as well as some of the archival materials maintained down in Fort Worth. But GSA is in the process of accessing the entire property, and so we need to move out. We are currently soliciting vendors to help us with that move, and the FRC records will go from Warehouse 9 up to the Lenexa Federal Record Center beginning late spring next year. And then I believe the archival records that were at that location are being split between the Fort Worth facility, where the Archives and Record Center share the new site, and Subtropolis up in Kansas City. No other major transshipments that would impact DOD. I think that was Tommy who posed the question. We do have a few cases where IRS list years are flowing to different centers to make it easier for us to focus on backlog reductions at a couple of the sites that have substantial backlogs. But I guess at that point, that should be about all we have going on next year, and I suspect it'll be more than enough to keep us very busy.
Thank you, Chris. There was one that came in. Let me find. Oh, do you know if agencies have the authorization to convert NARA standard forms to Nintex workflow forms for transferring records to the agency with the appropriate metadata? And I'm just repeating that question.
I'm going to say, as someone who trucks in NARA forms with agencies, that I have never had that question and am not sure of the answer. So as we're closing this out, I will see if I can find an answer before the end. If not, I'm not sure how we get answers back to people, but I will look into that.
I think this came in through RMCOM, so we should be able to
Okay.
track it back through an email. So we'll do that. I think, Lawrence, we've left the exception request to the end because you saved the best for last.
I don't know about that, but shoot.
So I think these are, is there a time frame for when NARA will respond to exemption requests already submitted?
So when we issued the guidance in the NARA bulletin that talks about exceptions, we did not put a separate deadline for when we would respond. We weren't sure what to expect and how many we would receive. So, we just didn't have enough information to be able to share what a reasonable time frame would be. They've proven to be fairly complicated in terms of, what we need to do to review, analyze, discuss with agencies, and elevate for decisions. So, we continue to work through those. We are committed to reviewing each one, coordinating with OMB on each request, and then obtaining a decision and then communicating back to agencies. And all I can say is we try and do it in as timely a way as we can, given all the moving parts and steps that we need to undertake to get those reviewed and decided.
So related to that, NARA bulletin implies the deadline to submit an exception request to OMB Memorandum 1921 is 31 December. Will the deadline to submit an exception request be extended to 30 June 2024?
Right. So, there is no separate deadline for agency exceptions. However, it follows that if agencies, want to be in compliance with the requirements, those exceptions should be submitted before the updated deadline, similar to the previous deadline in M1921. We also, understand that agencies are going to discover records that they may need exceptions for after the revised target dates are extended. That will require exceptions, and we're prepared to review all those as well as those situations arise. But we do encourage agencies to look at what they have in a very comprehensive way and submit those requests for exceptions to us certainly before the next deadline comes around, and as soon as you have the information available to share with National Archives.
Thank you. I'm just searching if there's anything. I guess the backlog should be cleared in a few months then. I don't know if that's referring to FRC backlogs or to the backlogs on the exception requests.
Well, I can speak to the exception requests. We haven't gotten or received a huge volume of exception requests to this point. All of them have been reviewed and discussed with our senior management here at the National Archives, and we're working on the coordination and drafting up the decision documents and responses to agencies.
Okay, and I'll also acknowledge there's been a nice conversation in the chat about a couple thank yous and a couple sort of other members of the community volunteering for guidance and help. So we appreciate that. I think that's all the questions that I see from across all the platforms. So if we have the next slide, and Lawrence, you can close.
Well, it looks like we planned this meeting for the perfect amount of time. We'll let you go a few minutes early with just this reminder that our next meeting will be Valentine's Day in 2023. So keep an eye out for communications and products and many of the things that we've talked about today. Hope everybody has a great holiday and a happy new year, and we will see you all again in February. Have a great afternoon.